welcoming you on this show, Insightful Leadership Conversations. Have been in silent admiration from a long distance and a few months since I saw a few of your interviews or shows. And welcome to this wonderful journey of the next 30 to 40 minutes where you can help us understand your life, your insights, the several different decisions, maybe difficult ones that you've had to make in this career journey of yours. Such an illustrious IPS officer of batch 1984. Congratulations for making it there several years ago, being the only woman in that batch, coming from a conservative family, taking a huge jump and leap of faith into a profession that most women would probably think twice. I only have deep admiration for you, Sutapa, and I would like to understand, how did this journey begin for you?
Okay, thank you. First of all, at the outset, let me thank you for having me on your program. And let me point out that I love the topic which you have chosen. You know, perfection is so colored by what inputs we have, what biases we have, the environment in which we live in. So I think it's absolutely fine to be imperfect, because then you keep going and you keep achieving new goals, or the goals which you have intended to achieve, the dreams which you have seen, which you want to fulfill now. So now, as for your question, yes, I was a very shy introvert person. I came from a very, very conservative Bengali family of Bihar. I studied in a convent school in a very strict environment, which was run by American nuns. And this was way back in the 60s and 70s. So you'll have to contextualize that period. Yes, it was a very unconventional path which I chose. Unconventional because of several reasons, because nobody in my family, what to talk of the women in my family, not even the male members of my family, none of them was in the police services. Times where women would readily go into service, right? And then, of course, you had a lot of naysayers who would discourage you from going into this profession. But you know what was important and what was relevant? These things are rather irrelevant if you think that they shouldn't be relevant, you know. So what was relevant was I had very progressive parents. That makes a lot of difference. You know, they did not know these buzzwords which we use today, that, you know, following your heart and living up to your passions and goal clarity and this and that. But in reality, those were the things which they were reinforcing in my life. Like, they told me and they gave me full wings to become whatever I wanted to become, whatever I wanted to do. You know, my mother was a simple, kind, loving homemaker. My father was from the state civil services. But, you know, one thing was very clear, that I had to become financially independent and I had to do well in whatever profession I chose to put myself in. So these two things were very clear right from the beginning. I was, you know, encouraged to pursue a lot of hobbies, which actually became a big eclectic list of things ranging from, you know, music to painting and all kinds of stuff in between. Gardening, because that background of in which you are sitting, that was also, and it still is, one of my passions. So, you know, there was no restriction in whatever I wanted to do. And, you know, those were the days, it might seem very unusual for the native digital generation, but we didn't have internets, right? We didn't have Kindles, we didn't have all these things. But I distinctly remember going to a huge public library in Patna. I belong to Patna, right? So, and it was a multi-storied library, and I can still visualize that silence, and I can visualize myself being surrounded with books. Of course, I would invariably go to the Enid Blytons and the Frank Brothers and all, but other things also were there. So that those memories are truly etched in my mind, on my mind. And another thing, during those days, there were, I think, half a dozen professions. You didn't have so many professions, and like in the Ivy League colleges, you can marry different professions and create a profession, marry different subjects and create a subject of your own. So we didn't have too many subjects, we didn't have too many professions. So I chose economics as a major, as you would say nowadays, and political science as a minor, which we used to say pass subject, honor subject and pass subject. And then I did my post-graduation in economics, and then I started out as a lecturer. I didn't choose, and even till this point of time, I was not very sure of as to what I wanted to do. I find it so so advanced or so unusual that now even 5-year-olds, when relatives come, they'll ask you, beta, what do you want to become? I mean, for me, this is an unusual question. So but then it was, at this point of time, there were a couple of inputs which used to go on in my subconscious mind. And one of them was that I saw a lot of injustice and poverty around me. The poverty, even more than the poverty, the injustice which people had to suffer, it actually made me cringe. I was very uncomfortable. So I wanted to do something about it. And so it would either be philanthropy or it would be service. Now, philanthropy, you need money, which we didn't, because I came from a typically, middle-class family. So I zeroed down on service. And here, my father, who was from the civil services, so he used to tell me so many anecdotes, so that was another source of inspiration for me. And so now things started becoming clear, and I appeared for the UPSC exams and got into the IPS in 1984. I thought, what better area of, performance or profession than the police services? Because here you get a lot of opportunities to deliver justice, a lot of opportunities to help people, because people actually look up to you. Rather, they look up to the uniform that you're wearing, the place where you're sitting, the chair where you're sitting. So then suddenly everything fell into place, And believe me, Meena, till this date, I have not forgotten the oath which we had taken during our passing out parade. It was an oath of service, of unbiased, unselfish service to the underserved. So that is something which has stayed with me. So yeah, that was a journey, and I still continue doing most of the things which I was doing there.
What an inspiring journey. And all of this, you're putting it together with so much humility, but it's probably one of the biggest that I have seen in terms of a woman transforming herself, dreaming about something big, giving back to society, and choosing services as one of the options. So thank you for sharing that very inspiring story. And I'm sure many women who still are in a state of doubt will probably be inspired to go the path that you have taken, Sutapa. So thank you so much. So this leads me to the next question, which is more around, I've been watching a lot of your talks, and in one of them, you have indicated that leaders come from everywhere.
Yeah.
Could you articulate on that?
Yeah, I had said that in a particular context. I think it was the TED Talk where I had said this. Yeah, actually, the context was of my great grandmother, and this was 1947 during the partition. So I was saying that, well, she lived in times when even if you had to talk to a male member which was not of your family, you had to have a parda or speak behind the cheek, the bamboo pardas. And she was widowed. She had 5 daughters and 1 son, and then 1947. So I was trying to say that there was no question of any leadership at that point of time in her. But she was brave. She did out of the box thinking, and they crossed over the border into India, right? Because of the necessity of the times, right? So now, if we could look at leadership in two parts, the qualities which a leader should have, then what can we list? We can list maybe clarity of thought, clarity of goal, a mission, a vision, integrity, lots of integrity, intellectual honesty, I must say, apart from other kinds of honesties, resilience, there must be resilience, and then courage of conviction for what you're doing. You have to believe what you're doing and walk the talk so that you lead the people who are looking up to you with inspiration. You inspire. Leadership is largely inspired, right? So now, how do these qualities manifest in leaders, right? How do they show? How do they, come by these thoughts of leadership, these qualities of leadership? Well, you can be. Some of it is born. You are born with a couple of leadership qualities. Whoever is a leader, and then some of it is observed and inherited. Like, in business, families, or in politics, children see a lot of things in their parents and they imbibe it, and then later on it comes out. It can be acquired also by studying in a B school or wherever, right? Or they hone their inherent qualities when they are faced with particular challenges. The ways in which, now if you notice clearly, you'll have umpteen examples of people, coming from anywhere, ordinary people doing extraordinary, displaying extraordinary leadership qualities because they have been faced with a challenge and they're responding to it in their own particular way. What I actually meant is that there are no defined templates. There is no SOP for leadership. It is so much based on the challenges which you face and the way you respond. And therefore, we see ordinary people displaying extraordinary leadership. This was what I meant by that statement of mine. Yeah.
And I think it is so contextual and relevant even in the times of today. And brilliantly summarized in terms of conviction one needs to have, which leads me to the next question, which is about, conviction and fearlessness go hand in hand.
Yes.
You were an IPS cadre 1984, the only woman to be in that batch. How did you manage to be fearless? And second, did men play a role in your career, in that fearless journey of yours?
Yeah. So, Meena, it wasn't so much of fear when I went to the National Police Academy for training, but yes, there was a lot of discomfort, a lot of unease, right? Now, why did it happen? In retrospect, when I think, it was because of my conservative upbringing. We were living in times when interaction between boys and girls, males and females, weren't encouraged much, So you tend to form certain ideas, you tend to enter a shell. And so, conversations and friendships become very difficult. And look at the irony. I was placed in a situation, I come from this background, and I'm placed in a situation where there are just other 79 male officers. So conversations and friendships, relationships became very difficult, right? It wasn't easy. It was not at all easy. And then, the IPS training is very, very arduous. It's very difficult, very difficult. And again, that conservative background kind of comes in, and my proclivity also. I was not too inclined towards sports and sports related activities. Academics was my core area. And the training out there has a lot of very hard physical elements on it, right? So, and then not only that, it was very difficult for me to adjust emotionally, also psychologically. It was a kind of roller coaster. That 1 year I spent there and a couple of months at the State Police Academy was difficult because of these reasons. Had my upbringing been different, right, it may not have been so difficult. So, upbringing matters and make a lot of difference either ways. For me, it was positive also, but here was that difficult portion which was due to upbringing. And then, now when I think, I feel that the men also, my batchmates, they were also coming from a similar background where such interactions may not have been encouraged much. So I had to undergo a lot of unlearning, a lot of new learnings. Those social conditionings which I had been subjected to, I had to unlearn them. But then somehow I was determined that if I have come this far, I am not going to look back. And then I discovered that there were certain things, although, it was very difficult to keep pace with their, physical prowess. I would fall behind in races. I would fall off horses, hurt myself, and that entire thing. But then I discovered there were areas where I had strengths, areas like forensic sciences, laws, and yoga. So while I was working on the difficult and my weaker areas, I leveraged these stronger points. And this gave me a template for the rest of my life. I still do that. You are going to meet up with challenges every day as long as you're alive. So that gave me strength, and that gave me a way out of my difficulties. Now you asked me a question about men having a role in my life. Of course. And let me concentrate on the positive impact. My father, of course, I told you, I looked up to him. I was inspired by him. He encouraged me in everything. He basically, he gave me the message that I could do anything which I set my heart to. And this is a very important message which parents must give their children, right? Mm-hmm. I was free to live my own dreams. I didn't have to live his dreams or my mother's dreams. So that was one part. And then, when I went to Lucknow, that was my first place of posting as ASP, fresh from the academy. I was put under a senior superintendent of police. And he was something, he taught me so many things. He taught me to be brave. He taught me to think out of the box. He would encourage me all the time. He would chide me if I was not living up to his expectations. So those two things were very important. These two persons were very, very important in my life. Of course, I've also met very negative and toxic males, but then, they have made me pull myself up. I have pushed the bar all the time, and they made me bring out the best in myself. So I'm thankful to them also, apart from the people, the two people who had so much of positive influence on me.
Beautiful. So, I heard you say that you had a great mentor when you had your first role or position, which is so crucial for that mental shift to happen into many things which strengthen us in our career. So, the question that I have now for you is, you've seen so many leaders, you've learned, unlearned, you are a leader yourself. What are two guiding leadership principles you've had in your life, Sutapa?
I think two very important principles will be first goal clarity, a vision and a mission, and obviously the ability to convey it to whoever is looking up to you, to your team, basically, right? And the second is self belief. You have to have a very strong belief system, but then you have to be careful that you form this belief system based on ethical values. Things, temporary things which can bring you immediate name, fame, etc., money, etc. But then, I don't know, I don't feel they are lasting values. And I don't think any good leader should run after these things, right? Anybody who wants to be a leader shouldn't be running after all these things. And, self-belief will keep you going when people try to pull you down. And especially if you are a woman and you're doing well, you will have a whole lot of people who will try to pull you down, who will try to downsize you, and somehow you have to hold together. And self-belief, helps during these times. And both of these things, they kind of reinforce each other, and both are absolutely necessary. I'll give you a small example. When this was about 2015, when I was asked to form and lead an organization which was supposed to look after women and children and anti-human trafficking efforts of the state. Initially, I didn't understand, but then gradually I saw there were efforts from within my own department to downsize me, to trash the great work that organization started doing. And letters would go missing which was supposed to come to us to attend important events, etc. I don't know, all those things. And I was termed as an activist, I don't know, ad hominem attacks, all kinds of things happen. So you have to understand these things, and you really have to live up to these two principles, because these are the ones which is going to keep you stay afloat.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's a very powerful message to all women who go into the workplace with a lot of self-doubt very many times. And I
Yes.
see this day in and day out, when even with the utmost education had at the workplace, there's a lot of self-doubt to take up that big role, to shift into a new position.
Yeah.
Maybe because of everything that is around. So, your message in terms of self belief is a very powerful one for women to reflect. So, Shutapa, this brings me to a completely different question. In your role as a woman IPS officer, there are lots of labels that you would have battled, which is so common in the corporate workplace also. So you find, when we take very strong decisions, we are labeled as being very aggressive, when actually it would have been assertion. So, in your role, I'm sure it would have been even more intense. So, what are your thoughts about the labeling that happens at the workplace, especially to women?
Yeah, there is a whole algorithm of this labeling, and the higher you rise up in your profession, that algorithm speeds up. But then you have to understand that it is not about you. It is about the person's subconscious and unconscious biases, deep biases that he or she, it can be a she also, who is treating you in the way he or she is treating. So the first thing to do is to understand that this is coming from the other side. You have nothing to do with it, and that you need to develop a thick skin. And the quicker the women understand this, it is better for them. It's much easier for them. Now, for the kind of leadership, the assertive or aggressive or whatever you want to say about it, in the police profession, it varies from the job profiles, different job profiles which you are sent to, different departments you are sent to as IPS officers. So at times, say law and order situations, right? Or say when you're facing you are into an encounter, then you have to be aggressive, no matter man or woman. Then leadership doesn't have a gender, right? We attribute those things, but actually it doesn't have. You need to do certain things which you should do. But then there are there are departments, there are job specifications where you can be, assertive, you can be collaborative, you can be participative in your leadership style. So it varies from work to work, and I think whatever is required of the leader at a particular point of time, that is what he or she should give, and not bother about what the other person is. They say in public life, there will be so many people who will be thinking so many different things. If you have your detractors, you have your admirers also.
So you talked about detractors and admirers and the fact that a woman should play on her strength. And I would extend it to say leaders must play on their strengths, because there could be a lot of derailers that will come along the journey. And that's so beautiful. You know, with all success comes a fair amount of rejections too at the workplace. There are you touched upon this very beautifully when you said you have to understand the psyche of people to kind of focus on what you want as a goal and keep moving forward. So when it comes to work and handling rejections, do you have specific instances that you would like to share with us?
I would like to share that same incident which I told you when I was asked to take over, rather build up, start, organize a setup within the police department. And I've told you the kind of rejections I faced, given the message that, yeah, you don't matter, or your work doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The organization you are heading is not making any difference. But then there would be people who would come and tell me. I was connecting directly to the people, the victims they would come and tell me that we have never seen this kind of a thing going on in this state. So that was the biggest trophy, that was the biggest appreciation. I didn't care who connected with my work, who praised the organization, who rejected us. It didn't matter. So, the answer is more or less the same as that I had given before. So we need to be careful about these things.
So you beautifully talked about the transformation that you brought into the system, and also the lives that you touched, which was transformatory for them. And that was your biggest goalpost, and you ran after it time and again, which is beautiful. What are your thoughts on gender equality at the workplace, Sutapa?
Well, that is one thing, and 26th of August is Equality Day for Women. And so in that context also, well, there is we have traveled a lot of distance has been covered on the equality index and on the journey of equality, but a lot of inequality still remains, whether it is the corporate sector or the private sector or the public sector, whatever. And some of this manifests in the opinions which the co-workers have about the women, right? It manifests in the gender pay gap, especially in the unorganized sector in India. It is not so much in the organized sector, but unorganized sector is a major defaulter. And then a lot of care work, family, looking after the family and caregiving work, which is a disproportionate burden which falls on the women. So these are some of the signs, which you can see. And unfortunately, they impact the performance of the women, right? And then, you have, as it is it is not a level playing field. Right from the beginning, right from the, in fact, from the womb, for a girl child, can be female feticide. If she's born, there can be infanticide, right? And there are so many differences in the treatment of a boy or a girl. The boy is treated as a trophy, the girl is a burden, because ultimately she's pariah dhan types, has to go to some other family. So the rate of investment for the parents doesn't seem. Now, it is not with everybody. Like, I had a different childhood, but unfortunately, most of the girls do not have these privileged childhoods, right? And then there are so many restrictions on the girl child. When she will come in, where she will go out, with whom she will talk, the length of her dress, this, that. And then you have the subcultures of victim blaming, you have the subcultures of silence in our society. So victim, if something happens, unfortunately, if some crime happens against her, she's to blame for it. Sometimes it is the length of the skirt, sometimes it is the mobile she's using, sometimes even the Maggie noodles which she's having. So all kinds of things. Now this, this kind of shrinks the girl's personality, and this grows exponentially with, as she grows ahead, as she becomes a woman. And this generates an insecurity, lack of self-belief, which she carries onto the workspace also. And that is truly impacting. And then you have issues like sexual harassment at workplaces. Women don't speak up about it because of the silence, culture of silence. She fears nobody's going to believe her. So these are the things which actually drag her down. Whether she's in the workspace or she is in home space, you have domestic violence, which comes in so many forms. It's not just physical violence, it is mental, sexual, emotional. So these are things which actually, and these are all cyclical things. They reinforce each other. So this lack of self-confidence shows up. That leads to, lack of performance, underperformance. She's not able to give her best, optimum best, live her optimum best of life. And then that whole cycle is reinforced again. And then that leads to inequalities of different kinds. And then these unconscious biases, gender stereotyping, gender discriminations, which girls and women have to face. Then they're not given field jobs. I had to face that a lot because there was always the doubt whether she'll be able to balance her family and this, that. There are umpteen number of people who will start thinking on your behalf. Right? So these are the things, and women must understand these microaggressions. They have to. They're not always open. But then it takes a lot of maturity to understand these undercurrents and then redesign your responses around them. I couldn't understand them in the beginning. Then gradually, I started understanding it, and then I calibrated my responses. So that is very important, to identify these microaggressions and then recalibrate your responses too. You have to understand the dynamics, and the sooner a woman does this, it's better for her.
Lovely.
So that. Yeah.
So understanding microaggression and responding appropriately, while understanding the big picture that there'll always be plenty of people who will take decisions for you and on behalf of you, was very, very insightful, Sutapa. That kind of you are on your superannuation now, and the journey could have been very different. I mean, you could have said, I will go back to my plants, I will definitely go back to singing, or I will do everything that I enjoy. But you stay committed to working, in areas such as diversity and inclusion. What is your motivation for this journey of yours now?
If you see, I'm kind of continuing what I used to do, because I face so much of lack of diversity. There's still a lot of lack of diversity in the police department. Only there are just 7% women. Just 7%. It's there in the corporates also. They start out at the intake point, there are 50% women, roughly average, and then just 3% to 4% CEOs. So, that set me thinking, what is it that you have these kinds of leaky buckets and these leaking pipelines? And that is why I went deep into diversity and inclusion and then unconscious biases. Many of these attitudes and many of these actions, they stem from the unconscious biases, conscious and unconscious biases which we have, right? So I'm continuing in this in the same area, because gender mainstreaming, gender budgeting, these are issues which every department needs to look into, every organization needs to look into, because with diversity come in a lot of productive ideas. You have the same sort of people, they will think the same sort of things. Now, for an organization to grow, you need different opinions. And that can only come in when you bring in diversity into the organization. And then why just gender diversity? Why just binaries? Now, you must bring in people of other genders also. The transgender bill has been passed. Why are we falling behind? We need to, notch up our attitude. Change attitudes towards these things. So, and you have geographical diversity, you have age-related diversity, right? People with age can bring in so much of experience. Young people can bring in so much of energy into a workplace. So why not combine all of these and achieve the optimal best? You need inclusivity. Apart from this, I do a lot of training in POSH-related training. That's the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Act, because I feel there are a lot of gray areas in this act. And if it is clarified through trainings and through awareness programs, then workspaces would become much more productive. There are certain fears around this act. There are certain, and those things need to be spoken about. So that is one other thing which I'm doing, apart from working on child protection issues, because basically, Meena, these are unfinished tasks which I'm carrying over from my IPS days. I actually always wanted to do a couple of things in these areas, and whatever I managed to do there, fine. Otherwise, I'm trying to complete them in this post superannuation period of mine.
Very lovely. And I'm sure that knowing you and the conversation we've had so far, I think that probably is your most contented space, giving back to society from where you began, taking care
Yes.
of women and children, and that makes for your holistic life that you're leading today. So that's wonderful. I see you very peaceful, very calm, and very positive as you want to move forward in this journey of yours, Sutapa.
Yeah.
So that brings me to the final question, which is, what is one message you would like to leave for leaders in the space of human-centric leadership? You've always done this, but there are many probably who need expertise like yours. And what would that one piece of advice be?
See, a lot will change in the new normal of the post-COVID universe that we are going to walk into. And I hope we walk into it soon enough. Because, many families would have experienced death, disease, slippages in their livelihood, coming down the economic ladder, and lots of emotional hurt. Being in a state of denial, it's not easy to reconcile with the fact that you have a dear one and the next moment the dear one is gone. You are not even able to attend the funeral. You attend the funeral on Facebook. We never thought we are going to become caged in such a fashion. This is not normal for human beings. But then the thing is, it is the new normal. We have to accept it. And therefore, I feel we need a lot of what you are saying, human-centric leadership. Now, even more. We always needed it, right? But we need it even more. leadership which has empathy in it, which has compassion, because the optimum in that person will come up only when you provide that environment for that person to to function in. So we need all these. And I have a slightly a kind of different opinion on leadership. Like any form of matter, we are also bundles of energy, right? So we have feminine energy inside us, masculine energy inside us. I have a feeling that in the days to come, all leaders, whether they are men or women, they will need feminine energy of nurturing, of caring, empathy, compassion, of understanding what the person is going through. So much of healing will be needed. People are so hurt about what has suddenly happened to them, right? They may be a part of the problem, but there is there's a state of stupefaction at the moment. So there is hurt. So that hurt will be needed. It will need to be healed. And for that, I find, the yin and yang will have to be balanced in every leader. At the moment, you will need more feminine energy in your leadership. Then maybe later on, things may change. So that is what I feel in the days to come, a leader will have to have.
Beautiful. A very different perspective of yin and yang. And we touched upon several different aspects of self-belief, compassionate leadership, leading to human centricity in the world, a passion for goals and being committed to whatever you take and being the best at it. How primary socialization influences a woman's leadership journey in her later years. So, Sutapa, this was a beautiful conversation with you. I don't have the least doubt that this is going to be a beautiful, useful one for many leaders globally. And thank you once again for consenting to be on this conversation. And thank you for sharing your valid insights. Good day and have a great career post superannuation as well.
Likewise, thank you so much for having me, and all the best to you and to our leadership qualities and to our feminine energies and so on. So thank you once again. It was lovely to be talking to you. Thank you.
Sutapa. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.